The whiskey glass slammed against the counter harder than Seth Brenner intended, drawing a few curious glances from other patrons in the dimly lit establishment. He winced, both at the attention and at the realization that he'd just spent his last $10 on this drink money that could have gone toward his daughter Emma's school supplies. "Sorry about that," he muttered to the bartender, who merely shrugged and moved on to another customer. At 32, Seth found himself in a place he'd never imagined. Single father, working 2 jobs, and still barely making ends meet. After his wife walked out 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their daughter alone, every day had become a delicate balancing act between providing for Emma and actually being present in her life. Tonight was a rare exception to his usual routine. His neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, had offered to watch Emma so he could have a few hours to himself, something about him looking like he might collapse from exhaustion if he didn't take a break. He'd reluctantly agreed, though the guilt of spending money on a drink rather than saving it nagged at him. Seth ran a hand through his dark brown hair, making a mental note to get it cut soon. Another expense he'd been putting off. His attention drifted to the television above the bar, which was broadcasting a business news segment. The caption read, "Pembroke Tech revolutionizes healthcare industry." He wasn't particularly interested in business news, but something about the elegant woman being interviewed caught his eye. She spoke with quiet confidence about neural interfaces and medical innovations that sounded like science fiction to him. The caption identified her as R. Pembroke, CEO. "Pretty impressive, right?" the bartender commented, noticing Seth's attention on the screen. "They say she built that company from scratch. Now it's worth billions." Seth nodded absently. "Good for her, I guess." He couldn't help but feel a twinge of resentment toward people whose biggest concern was probably which luxury car to drive that day. The door to the bar swung open, letting in a gust of cool autumn air. Seth didn't bother looking up until he heard a commotion near the entrance, raised voices, the scraping of chairs. "I told you I'm not interested," a woman's voice said firmly. "Come on, sweetheart, don't be like that. Let me buy you a drink," a man slurred in response. Seth glanced over his shoulder. A woman with auburn hair was trying to move past a large, intoxicated man who kept blocking her path. There was something vaguely familiar about her, though Seth couldn't place it. "Please step aside," she said, her voice calm but with an edge of steel. "Not until you give me a chance. What are you, too good for me?" The man grabbed her arm. Seth was off his stool before he could think better of it. Years of construction work had built his frame solid, though he was more lean than bulky. He approached the pair, keeping his voice low. "The lady asked you to step aside," he said. The drunk man turned, his face flushing with anger. "Mind your own business, pal. I'm making it my business." Seth positioned himself between the woman and her harasser. "She's not interested. Time for you to find somewhere else to be." The man's eyes narrowed, and Seth braced himself. He hadn't been in a fight since high school, but he recognized the look of someone about to throw a punch. When it came, he managed to dodge the worst of it, taking a glancing blow to the shoulder instead of the face. Seth didn't throw a punch back. Instead, he used the man's momentum to push him off balance, sending him stumbling into a table. The drunk recovered quickly, though, grabbing a bottle and swinging it wildly. Seth felt a sharp pain as the bottle connected with his temple, followed by the warm trickle of blood down his cheek. The bar fell silent. The drunk seemed surprised by what he'd done, his face suddenly uncertain. 2 of the bar's security personnel appeared, grabbing the aggressor and escorting him out. Seth pressed his hand to his temple, feeling the sticky wetness of blood. "Are you all right?" The woman he'd defended was suddenly beside him, concern etched on her face. Up close, he could see her eyes were a striking green, intelligent and assessing as they examined his injury. "I'm fine," Seth said automatically, though his head was throbbing. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine, thanks to you." She guided him to a chair. "That needs attention. It's not deep, but head wounds bleed a lot." The bartender appeared with a clean towel and a first aid kit. "Should I call an ambulance?" "No," Seth said quickly. "No ambulance." He couldn't afford an emergency room visit. The woman took the towel. "Let me help." She pressed it gently against his temple. I'm Rachel, by the way, Rachel Pembrooke. The name registered vaguely in Seth's mind, but he was too focused on the pain to place it. Seth Brenner. Thank you for stepping in, Seth. Not many people would have done that for a stranger. He shrugged, then winced at the movement. Couldn't just stand by. Rachel cleaned the cut with surprising efficiency, her movements precise and confident. This isn't too bad, it won't need stitches. You a doctor? Seth asked. A small smile touched her lips. No, but I've had some first aid training. Hold still. She applied a butterfly bandage from the kit, her fingers cool against his skin. Seth found himself noticing small details about her, the faint scent of something expensive and subtle, the way her hair fell just past her shoulders, the lack of a wedding ring on her left hand. There, she said, stepping back to examine her work. That should hold. Thanks. Seth stood, swaying slightly as a wave of dizziness hit him. Rachel steadied him with a hand on his arm. You should sit down, you might have a mild concussion. I can't, Seth said. I need to get home. My daughter, your daughter, Emma, she's 8. My neighbor's watching her, but I shouldn't be gone too long. Rachel's expression softened. At least let me drive you home. You shouldn't be driving right now. Seth hesitated. Under normal circumstances, he would have declined, but the throbbing in his head made the thought of driving unappealing. All right. Thanks. Rachel insisted on paying his tab despite his protests. Outside, Seth expected her to lead him to a typical car, maybe a nice sedan or even a luxury model. Instead, she walked him to a sleek black Tesla that looked like it cost more than he made in several years. Nice car, he commented as she helped him into the passenger seat. It gets me where I need to go, she said simply. Where do you live? Seth gave her his address, feeling suddenly self-conscious. His apartment was in one of the more modest areas of the city, a far cry from wherever someone who drove a car like this probably lived. As Rachel navigated through the evening traffic, Seth found himself studying her profile. There was something both commanding and gentle about her presence. She caught him looking and smiled. How's your head feeling? I'll live, he said. So what brings someone like you to a place like Kelly's Bar? Doesn't seem like you're seen. She raised an eyebrow. Someone like me. Seth gestured vaguely at her designer clothes and the car. You know, you seem, I don't know, sophisticated. Rachel laughed, a warm sound that made Seth smile despite his headache. I've been working non-stop for weeks. I needed a quiet drink somewhere nobody would recognize me. Her expression turned rueful. So much for that plan. Why would people recognize you? She glanced at him, seeming surprised by the question. My company has been in the news lately. Before Seth could ask what company, she pulled up in front of his apartment building. The 4-story brick structure looked especially shabby next to her gleaming vehicle. This is me, he said unnecessarily. Thanks for the ride. Let me help you up, Rachel insisted, just to make sure you get in safely. Too tired to argue, Seth led her into the building and up to his second-floor apartment. He fumbled with his keys, suddenly embarrassed by the peeling paint on his door. Inside, Mrs. Caldwell rose from the couch, her kind face creased with concern when she saw the bandage on Seth's head. What happened to you? Just a little accident, Seth said, not wanting to worry her. Mrs. Caldwell, this is Rachel. Rachel, my neighbor and lifesaver, Mrs. Caldwell. The older woman smiled. Emma's been asleep for about an hour. She finished all her homework and had dinner. Thanks so much, Seth said, reaching for his wallet. Let me pay you, Mrs. Caldwell waved him off. Don't be silly, Emma's a delight. Her eyes flicked curiously to Rachel, then back to Seth with a hint of approval. I'll let myself out, you should rest that head of yours. After she left, Seth stood awkwardly in his living room, suddenly aware of how sparse it was. A worn couch, a small TV, and Emma's drawings taped to the walls made up most of the decor. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee, he offered. Water would be nice, Rachel said, looking around with interest rather than judgment. Seth went to the kitchen, returning with 2 glasses of water. He found Rachel examining the photographs on his bookshelf, mostly pictures of Emma at various ages. She's beautiful, Rachel said, smiling at a photo of Emma missing her front teeth. Yeah, she is, Seth handed her the water. She's the best thing in my life. Her mother, Rachel asked cautiously, left 3 years ago, decided family life wasn't for her. Seth tried to keep the bitterness from his voice. It's been just Emma and me since then. Rachel nodded, not pushing for more details. You're doing a good job. I can tell just from the pictures how happy she is. Something about her sincerity made Seth's throat tighten. I try. It's not always easy. The most important things rarely are. Rachel set down her glass. I should go. You need to rest. Thanks again for the ride and for patching me up. At the door, Rachel hesitated. Would it be all right if I checked on you tomorrow, just to make sure you're okay? Seth blinked in surprise. You don't have to do that. I'd like to, she said. If that's all right. Sure, Seth found himself saying. I mean, yes, that would be nice. Rachel smiled. Good night, Seth Brenner. After she left, Seth sank onto the couch, pressing his fingers gently against the bandage on his temple. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something familiar about Rachel Pembrooke, something beyond their brief encounter at the bar. He grabbed his phone and typed her name into the search engine. His eyes widened as the results loaded. The woman who had driven him home, who had cleaned his wound with such care, was the CEO of Pembroke Technologies, the same woman he'd seen on the television at the bar. Rachel Pembroke wasn't just wealthy, she was one of the richest women in the country. Seth stared at his phone in disbelief. What would someone like her want with someone like him? The next morning, Seth woke to Emma's small hand patting his cheek. Daddy, what happened to your head? Her blue eyes were wide with concern. Seth sat up carefully, his head still throbbing. Just a little accident, sweetie, nothing to worry about. Emma's brow furrowed as she examined the bandage. Did you fall? Something like that, Seth said, not wanting to explain the bar fight to his 8-year-old. How about some breakfast? In the kitchen, Seth poured cereal for Emma while brewing a strong cup of coffee for himself. His mind kept returning to Rachel Pembroke. He'd convinced himself she wouldn't actually come by to check on him. People like her had more important things to do than follow up with strangers they met in bars. Daddy, it's Saturday, Emma reminded him as she spooned cereal into her mouth. You promised we could go to the park. Seth had forgotten. Of course, Pumpkin, we'll go after breakfast. And can we get ice cream? Emma's eyes lit up. Seth checked his wallet. He had exactly $12 to last until payday on Friday. We'll see, he said, hating how often he had to use those words with her. They were just finishing breakfast when there was a knock at the door. Seth opened it to find Rachel standing there, looking impossibly put together in jeans and a simple white blouse that probably cost more than his entire wardrobe. Good morning, she said, smiling. I brought coffee and pastries. I hope that's okay. Before Seth could respond, Emma appeared at his side, curious. Who are you? She asked Rachel directly. Emma, Seth admonished gently. Manners. It's fine, Rachel laughed. I'm Rachel. I helped your dad yesterday when he hurt his head. Emma looked up at Seth, then back to Rachel with newfound respect. Did you put that bandage on him? I did, Rachel confirmed. I came to check if he's feeling better. Emma nodded solemnly. He says he's fine, but he took extra aspirin this morning. I saw him. Seth felt his cheeks warm. Thank you for that report, Dr. Emma. He stepped back to let Rachel in. Please come in. Rachel handed him a paper bag that smelled deliciously of fresh pastries and a tray with 2 large coffees. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got an assortment, and coffee I thought you might need it. Thank you, Seth said, genuinely touched by her thoughtfulness. You really didn't have to do this. Are those chocolate croissants? Emma asked, peering into the bag. Rachel smiled. They might be. Why don't you check? While Emma excitedly investigated the pastries, Seth led Rachel to the small kitchen table. This is very kind of you, he said quietly. But I know who you are now. You must have better things to do than check on someone like me. Rachel's smile faltered. Someone like you. I looked you up after you left, Seth admitted. You're Rachel Pembrooke, CEO of Pembroke Technologies. He hesitated, not exactly in my social circle. And what circle would that be? There was a challenge in her voice. The regular people's circle, Seth said with a self-deprecating smile. The struggling to make rent circle. Rachel's expression softened. Maybe I'm tired of my circle. She glanced at Emma, who was happily biting into a chocolate croissant. And maybe I enjoyed meeting someone who helped me simply because it was the right thing to do, not because of who I am or what I could do for them. Seth didn't know how to respond to that. He was saved by Emma, who approached with chocolate on her chin. Rachel, Daddy's taking me to the park today. Do you want to come? She asked. Seth began to protest. Emma, I'm sure Rachel has. I'd love to, Rachel interrupted. If that's okay with your dad. Emma looked expectantly at Seth, who found himself nodding despite his reservations. Sure, if you really want to. The park was only a few blocks from Seth's apartment. Emma ran ahead to the playground while Seth and Rachel followed at a more sedate pace. You really don't have to do this, Seth said. I'm sure you have more important things to do on a Saturday. Rachel shook her head. Nothing more important than taking a day off. I can't remember the last time I went to a park just to enjoy it. Seth studied her, trying to reconcile the powerful CEO he'd read about online with the woman walking beside him. Why me? He asked finally. Why are you here? Rachel considered the question. When you stepped in at the bar, you didn't know who I was. You didn't want anything from me. Do you know how rare that is in my life? She watched Emma climb the jungle gym. And then I found out you're a single father doing your best for your daughter. I admire that. I'm just doing what any parent would do, Seth said. Not any parent, Rachel said quietly. My father was wealthy, but he was never there. Material things don't make up for presents. They reached a bench and sat down, watching Emma play with other children. Seth was acutely aware of Rachel beside him, her perfume, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, how her eyes crinkled when she smiled at Emma's antics. What happened to her mother, if you don't mind me asking? Rachel said after a while. Seth sighed. Melissa and I got married young. Had Emma when we were 23. I thought we were happy, but Melissa felt trapped. She said she wasn't meant to be a mother, that she had dreams she couldn't pursue with a family. He shrugged. One day I came home from work and she was gone, left a note saying she needed to find herself. I'm sorry, Rachel said, her hand briefly touching his arm. That must have been difficult. It was hard on Emma at first. She didn't understand why her mom didn't want her. Seth's jaw tightened. That was the worst part, but we've figured it out, the two of us. Rachel nodded. You've done well. She seems like a happy child. I try, work a lot of hours to make ends meet, construction during the day, bartending 3 nights a week. Seth hadn't meant to share so much, but something about Rachel made it easy to talk. What about you? How does someone become a tech billionaire before 40? Rachel laughed. I'm 34, and it wasn't exactly the plan. I developed a neural interface technology in graduate school that had applications for paralysis patients. One thing led to another, and suddenly I was running a company instead of working in a lab. She looked slightly wistful. Sometimes I missed the simplicity of just being a researcher. Daddy, Rachel, watch me, Emma called from the top of the slide. They both waved and watched as she slid down, her face alight with joy. Ice cream, Emma called as she ran up to them. You said maybe we could get ice cream, Seth hesitated, thinking of the $12 in his wallet. Before he could respond, Rachel stood up. Ice cream sounds perfect, she said. I think I saw a stand near the entrance. My treat. Seth started to protest, but Rachel gave him a look that silenced him. Please, let me do this small thing. Emma cheered and grabbed Rachel's hand, pulling her toward the ice cream stand. Seth followed, watching as his daughter chatted animatedly with Rachel, who listened with genuine interest to Emma's detailed explanation of why mint chocolate chip was superior to all other flavors. Rachel bought ice cream for all 3 of them, and they sat on a park bench to enjoy it. Seth couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so relaxed, so unburdened by the constant stress of making ends meet. What do you do at your company? Emma asked Rachel, ice cream dripping down her cone. I help make technology that helps people who can't move their arms or legs, Rachel explained simply. Emma's eyes widened. Like robots, kind of, Rachel smiled. We make devices that can read what your brain wants to do and then help your body do it. That's cool, Emma said, impressed. Do you make a lot of money, Emma? Seth admonished, embarrassed. Rachel laughed. It's okay. Yes, Emma, my company does make money, but the important thing is that we help people. Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer, and returned to her ice cream. Later, as they walked back toward Seth's apartment, Emma skipping ahead, Rachel turned to him. Would you and Emma like to have dinner with me tonight? Nothing fancy, just, I'd like to spend more time with you both. Seth hesitated. Rachel, I'm not sure what's happening here, but... You should know I can't offer you anything. I'm just a construction worker trying to raise his kid. I'm not asking you for anything, Rachel said softly. I'm just asking for dinner, to get to know you better. Something in her eyes made Seth's heart beat faster. Okay, he said. Dinner would be nice. That evening, Rachel arrived at their apartment with bags of groceries, insisting on cooking for them. Seth watched in amazement as she moved around his small kitchen with unexpected skill, preparing a pasta dish that had Emma asking for seconds. After Emma went to bed, Seth and Rachel sat on his couch, talking well into the night. She told him about the pressure of running a company, the loneliness of success, the vultures who only saw her bank account. He shared his struggles to provide for Emma, his dreams of someday starting his own contracting business, his fears of not being enough for his daughter. When Rachel finally left, Seth found himself standing at the window, watching her get into her expensive car, wondering if he'd ever see her again. Despite her words, their worlds were so different. What could someone like him possibly offer someone like her? To his surprise, Rachel called the next day, and the day after that. She began to carve out time in her busy schedule to see Seth and Emma, bringing laughter and light into their small apartment. She helped Emma with her science project, taught Seth how to make proper risotto, and never once made them feel like they were a charity case. A month into their unusual friendship, Seth still couldn't quite believe it was real. He kept waiting for Rachel to realize she was slumming it, to disappear back into her world of board meetings and private jets. Instead, she invited them to her home for the first time, a sleek penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Emma was enthralled by the view, pressing her nose against the glass while Seth stood awkwardly in the center of the living room, feeling out of place among the modern art and designer furniture. "You're uncomfortable," Rachel observed, handing him a glass of wine. "A little," Seth admitted. "This place costs more than I'll make in my lifetime." Rachel set down her glass. "Seth, I need to tell you something. When we met, when you helped me at that bar, it was the first time in years that someone saw me as just a person, not as a CEO or a billionaire or a potential business connection." She took his hand. "I care about you, and Emma, the way you live your life, the priority you place on being there for her, it's worth more than any amount of money." Seth looked into her eyes, seeing sincerity there. "I care about you too, more than I thought possible after such a short time." He sighed. "But I can't help thinking that you could have anyone. Why would you choose someone like me?" "Because you're real," Rachel said simply. "Because when I'm with you and Emma, I remember what matters. Because you make me laugh and you never ask me for anything, and you treat me like Rachel, not like Rachel Pembrooke, CEO." Seth felt something shift between them. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her. Rachel responded immediately, her hands coming up to frame his face, careful of the now healed cut at his temple. When they broke apart, Seth rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how this works," he admitted. "Dating a billionaire wasn't exactly in my life plan." Rachel laughed softly. "Dating a construction worker wasn't in mine either. Let's figure it out together." In the months that followed, they created a new normal. Rachel scaled back her work hours to spend more time with Seth and Emma. Seth overcame his pride to accept Rachel's offer to help with Emma's education fund. They navigated the curious looks when they went out together, the whispers when Rachel showed up at Emma's school events, the occasional tabloid speculation about the mysterious new man in tech heiress Rachel Pembroke's life. Through it all, they built something genuine. Rachel found in Seth and Emma the family she'd always wanted but never had. Seth found in Rachel a partner who valued him for exactly who he was, who saw his dedication to Emma not as a burden but as his greatest strength. 1 year after their chance meeting at Kelly's bar, Seth took Rachel back there for a drink. The bartender recognized them, raising an eyebrow at how much had changed. "Remember that night?" Seth asked, touching the faint scar at his temple. "How could I forget?" Rachel smiled. "Best bar fight I've ever been involved in." "I had no idea who you were," Seth mused. "Just saw someone who needed help." "That's why I fell in love with you," Rachel said. "You didn't see Rachel Pembroke, billionaire CEO, you just saw someone who needed help." Seth took her hand across the table. "I have something to ask you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "It's not fancy," he warned. I saved up for it myself. Wouldn't let you pay for this. Rachel's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. Seth, Rachel Pembrooke, this past year has been the best of my life. You've shown Emma and me what it means to be a family. Will you marry me? Tears filled Rachel's eyes as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. As Seth slipped the ring onto her finger, the bartender set 2 champagne glasses in front of them. On the house, he said with a grin. Who would have thought a bar fight would lead to this? 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony with Emma as the flower girl. Rachel's board members sat alongside Seth's construction crew colleagues, an unlikely but harmonious blend of guests. 2 years after that, they welcomed a son, Benjamin, into their family. Seth had started his own contracting company with Rachel's support, building it into a successful business that focused on affordable housing projects. Rachel had restructured Pembroke Technologies to allow her more family time while still driving innovation in medical technology. On Emma's 12th birthday, as they watched her blow out candles on a cake Rachel had insisted on baking herself, with mixed results, Seth pulled his wife close. Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up that night at the bar? He asked. Rachel looked around at their home, not her sleek penthouse or Seth's small apartment, but a new place they'd chosen together, filled with a blend of practical comfort and understated luxury. No, she admitted, but I'm grateful every day for that drunk guy who wouldn't take no for an answer. Seth laughed. Maybe we should send him a thank you card. Maybe we should, Rachel agreed, watching as Emma showed her little brother how to cut the cake. Or maybe we should just be grateful that you were the kind of man who would step in to help a stranger, not knowing or caring who she was. Seth kissed her temple, right over the spot where he'd once been injured defending her. Best decision I ever made. Rachel leaned into him, her success and wealth no longer barriers between them but simply parts of who they were together. Mine too, she whispered. Mine too.